The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across her face. But something was wrong with the way she held that rosary. Clyde had found her an hour ago, kneeling beside a dead horse in the middle of nowhere. Her black habit torn at the shoulder, beads scattered in the sand like fallen stars. She claimed to be Sister Rosalie Dean from the mission at San Miguel. But no mission sent their nuns traveling alone through Apache territory at night. She thanked him for the rescue with words that sounded rehearsed, yet her eyes held secrets that made his skin crawl with something between fear and fascination. When he asked how she survived 3 days without water, she simply smiled and said, "God provides." But her lips weren't cracked, her skin wasn't sunburned, and her hands were too soft for someone who'd been clawing through desert sand. The strangest part wasn't her perfect appearance or her convenient story. It was the way she watched him when she thought he wasn't looking, studying his movements like she was memorizing something important. And when the wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke from distant fires, she didn't ask what was burning. She already knew. Clyde poked the fire, sending sparks spiraling into the star-filled sky, and tried to shake the feeling that finding her wasn't luck at all, because in his saddlebags, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a letter with her name on it. A letter he'd never seen before tonight, written in handwriting he didn't recognize, containing information about his burned ranch that only 3 people in the territory should have known. But Sister Rosalie Dean was supposed to be dead, according to the mission records he checked 2 months ago. The letter felt heavier than it should have, as Clyde's fingers traced its edges through the leather saddlebag. Sister Rosalie sat perfectly still across the fire, her hands folded in prayer, but her eyes remained open, fixed on him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. The flames illuminated the delicate curve of her neck, where her habit had slipped, revealing skin that glowed like polished ivory in the firelight. "You seem troubled, Mr. Baxter," she said softly, her voice carrying a richness that didn't belong to any nun he'd ever met. "Perhaps confession would ease your burden." He jerked his hand away from the saddlebag. She knew his name, though he'd never given it. The realization hit him like cold water. But before he could respond, she shifted closer to the fire, and he caught the scent of jasmine mingling with wood smoke. No woman who'd spent days in the desert should smell of flowers. "How do you know my name?" Word travels fast in small territories. Her fingers worked the rosary beads with practiced precision, but he noticed she moved them in the wrong direction, counterclockwise instead of the traditional path of prayer. Especially about men who've lost everything to fire, the muscles in his jaw clenched. His ranch had burned 3 weeks ago while he was in town buying supplies. When he returned, nothing remained but ash and the acrid smell of kerosene. The kind of fire that burned too hot, too fast, too deliberate. The kind that required planning. "Tell me about the mission at San Miguel," he said, testing her story like a man probing a wound. "Beautiful place, stone walls thick enough to keep out the world's temptations." She looked directly at him, and her smile carried something that made his blood run warm, despite the desert chill. "Though I found that the strongest walls are often the easiest to breach, don't you think?" The way she spoke about temptation made him think of things that had nothing to do with prayer. Her lips formed each word with deliberate care, and when she moistened them with the tip of her tongue, he found himself leaning forward without realizing it. "What brought you to the desert, sister?" "The same thing that brought you, I suspect. The search for truth." She stood gracefully, moving around the fire toward him, her habit whispering against the sand. "Though sometimes we find more than we bargained for." When she knelt beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her body, she reached into her habit and withdrew something that made his heart stop. A piece of charred wood from his ranch, carved with his father's initials. "Tell me, Clyde," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. "Do you believe in divine justice?" The charred wood fell from Clyde's trembling fingers into the sand. His father had carved those initials the day they bought the land, promising it would stay in the Baxter family forever. Now it existed only as evidence in the hands of a woman who claimed to serve God, but moved like sin itself. Where did you get this? His voice came out rough, dangerous. Sister Rosalie remained kneeling beside him, so close he could see golden flecks in her dark eyes that seemed to dance with their own light. Does it matter? What matters is that someone wanted you to. Habit. Her fingers brushed his wrist as she spoke, and the contact sent heat shooting up his arm. Someone who knows exactly what you've lost. You're no nun. The words escaped before he could stop them, carrying 3 weeks of rage and confusion. Nuns don't travel alone through Apache country. They don't survive in the desert without water. And they sure as hell don't carry evidence from burned ranches. Instead of denying it, she smiled, and the expression transformed her face from beautiful to absolutely dangerous. What gave me away? The jasmine oil? Or the fact that I haven't asked you to pray with me once? He should have been angry, should have demanded answers, but all he could think about was how her lips curved when she smiled, how her habit had slipped further down her shoulder, revealing the pale slope of her collarbone, how every instinct screamed that she was trouble, while every nerve in his body begged him to find out what kind. Who are you really? Someone who's been looking for you, Clyde Baxter. Someone who knows that 3 men burned your ranch while you were buying supplies, that coincidentally took twice as long to load as usual. She traced patterns in the sand between them, her movements hypnotic in the firelight. Someone who knows you've been asking questions in every saloon from here to Tucson, looking for those men. The truth hit him like a physical blow. You know who burned my ranch. I know many things. She leaned closer, and he caught another wave of that intoxicating jasmine scent. I know Thomas Kellerman paid your supplier to delay you that day. I know Marcus Wade provided the kerosene. And I know Samuel Cross lit the match that destroyed everything your father built. 3 names he'd been hunting for weeks, delivered by a woman dressed as a nun in the middle of the desert. It was too convenient, too perfect. But the way she spoke them with quiet certainty and something that looked like sympathy made him believe every word. Why tell me this? Her hand moved to rest against his chest, directly over his heart, and he felt the world shift beneath him. Because, Clyde, sometimes God's justice requires very human hands. Her hand remained pressed against his chest, feeling the rapid drumbeat of his heart beneath her palm. The heat of her touch seemed to burn through his shirt, branding him with a need that had nothing to do with vengeance and everything to do with the way she looked at him like she could see straight into his soul. Justice, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. What kind of justice? The kind that balances scales. She withdrew her hand slowly, deliberately, letting her fingers trail down his chest before pulling away completely. Thomas Kellerman owns half the banks in the territory. Marcus Wade supplies water to every ranch within 50 miles. Samuel Cross controls the telegraph lines. She stood and began pacing around the fire, her movements fluid and predatory. Separately, they're successful men with spotless reputations. Together, they've been systematically destroying small ranchers for 2 years, buying the land for pennies after convenient accidents. The pieces clicked together in his mind like chambers in a revolver. My father's ranch wasn't the first. The 7th, she stopped directly across from him, fire dancing between them. But it will be the last if you're willing to help me stop them. Help you? He stood, closing some of the distance between them. Lady, I don't even know your real name. For all I know, you're working with them. The laugh that escaped her lips was rich and dangerous. If I were working with them, Clyde, you'd already be dead. They ordered your elimination 3 days ago. She reached into her habit again and pulled out a folded paper. $50 for the man who brings them proof of your death. The bounty poster bore his name and a rough sketch of his face. Someone had drawn an X across his forehead in red ink. His hands clenched into fists as the reality sank in. He wasn't just hunting them anymore. They were hunting him. My real name is Rose Delqua. I was engaged to marry Samuel Cross 2 months ago. Her voice carried pain now, real and raw. Until I discovered what he and his partners were doing, until I learned that my father's death wasn't an accident. The firelight played across her features as she continued. They thought killing him would convince me to marry Samuel, quickly secure his position in New Orleans society. They didn't expect me to investigate. She touched the false habit she wore. They certainly didn't expect me to disappear from my own engagement party and track them across 3 states. So you're not seeking divine justice. You want revenge? I want both. She moved closer again, and this time when she looked at him, he saw something that made his breath catch. Vulnerability hidden beneath all that dangerous beauty. But I can't do it alone. They're too powerful, too connected. The smart thing would be to ride away, leave her to her schemes, and as they walked him through the livestock pens, Boone watched healthy cattle grazing across neatly rotated pastures, while a modest but efficient chicken coop supplied more than enough fresh eggs for trade. We've built steady trade with 3 nearby settlements, Helena explained, discussing margins, seasonal cycles, and supply forecasts with calm confidence. This isn't just surviving, it's prospering. Boone couldn't hide his respect. What the 3 women had created wasn't simply a homestead. It was a strategically run, carefully structured enterprise capable of sustaining all of them. Even more than the profits, it was the unity behind it that struck him. A shared purpose, a shared vision, something he had never truly known. The house, Helena added as they approached the farmhouse, has 4 bedrooms. We use 3, but we always hoped. She let the sentence fade, but the meaning lingered between them. Inside, the home felt warm and lived in. Not extravagant, but solid and thoughtfully kept. The kitchen was built for shared meals. The sitting room invited long conversations. Every corner reflected effort, pride, and intention. It was a home in the truest sense. We're not expecting an answer today, Ruth said gently once they were seated. This is important. We want you certain before you decide anything. But Boone already felt the answer forming. Yes, he was drawn to them. Helena's steady touch, Ruth's perceptive smile, Magdalene's fierce fire. But what moved him more deeply was belonging. They weren't offering comfort. They were offering partnership. What happens now, he asked. All 3 smiled, knowing that his question carried commitment within it. That evening, they cooked together. The earlier tension had softened into cautious hope. Conversation flowed easily. Crops, trade routes, frontier hardships. The women moved in quiet coordination, their teamwork seamless. Then Helena grew serious. There's more, she said. Marcus left us with debts. The room stilled. Madeline retrieved a ledger. Supplies ordered on credit, equipment never paid for. He used our reputation, then disappeared. The figures were heavy, enough to crush them. How bad? Boone asked. Bad enough that if we can't clear it within a month, Ruth answered quietly, we lose everything. Boone studied the numbers. Significant, but workable. What impressed him most wasn't the debt. It was their honesty. They could have hidden this. Marcus damaged you, he said firmly, but this can be fixed. He looked up. I have capital from selling my previous holdings, enough to settle this and grow what you've built. Relief washed over them. Helena's composure broke into tears. Ruth squeezed his hand. Magdalene's guarded expression softened. But, Boone added, voice steady, we do this properly. Legal agreements, clear responsibilities, equal say. He met each of their eyes. And we let the personal side develop naturally. No pressure, no forced expectations. Helena smiled through tears. That's all we wanted. A true partner, an equal. That night they planned not just survival, but a future. 3 months later, Boone stood again in that same yard. The farm had grown beyond what any of them imagined. More livestock, stronger irrigation, expanded trade across 3 territories. The debts were cleared, profits steady. But the real success was them. Helena became his closest strategic partner, their connection deepening into something built on respect and affection. Ruth's creativity and calm insight made her indispensable. their quiet work hours turning into a bond that felt effortless. Madeline had guarded her heart longest, but one spontaneous kiss while repairing fencing changed everything. What once seemed impossible had evolved into something balanced and real. They created their own structure, their own definition of family, their own way of loving. Yes, there were challenges, moments of jealousy, shared decisions, the awareness that society might never understand them. But what they had was stronger than outside opinion. The legal partnership secured their future. The farm flourished. New rooms were added, including a proper office for managing trade. And Boone no longer felt the loneliness that once pushed him toward isolation. One evening, the four of them sat on the expanded porch overlooking thriving fields. "Any regrets?" Helena asked softly. Boone studied the three women who had transformed his life. "Only one," he said. "I regret it took Marcus Vance's betrayal to bring us together. We could have started this sooner." Their laughter carried into the dusk, full, free, certain. In a world that demanded conformity, they chose connection. In a society bound by tradition, they built their own meaning of partnership, and in doing so, they found something lasting. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and watch the next unforgettable tale on your screen. And don't forget, here on Kindness Matters, we believe the strongest foundations are built on respect, courage, and heart. Himself to turn away, but he could hear every whisper of fabric as she changed clothes behind him. "I worked for the Pinkerton Detective Agency for 3 years." Her voice carried clearly in the desert air, specializing in infiltration and elimination of criminal organizations. "My father wasn't just murdered Clyde. He was investigating Cross and his partners for the government." The rustle of clothing continued, and he fought the urge to glance over his shoulder. "So, you're a federal agent?" "Was until I discovered my father's death was ordered by the same men who were paying my salary." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Turns out Cross has friends in very high places. When I tried to report what I'd learned, I found myself charged with stealing evidence and marked for elimination." "So, you decided to handle it yourself?" "I decided to disappear and handle it myself." The sounds of dressing stopped. "You can turn around now." He turned and nearly lost his ability to breathe. Gone was any pretense of religious modesty. Rose stood before him in form-fitting black leather that hugged every curve, her dark hair freed from the confines of the habit and falling in waves around her shoulders. She looked like a beautiful weapon, deadly and irresistible. "Better?" she asked, though her smile suggested she knew exactly what effect she was having on him. "You're going to get us both killed." The words came out rougher than he intended. "Probably." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see moonlight reflected in her eyes. But what a way to go. Her fingers traced the buttons of his shirt, not quite intimate, but promising something that made his pulse race. "The question is, Clyde Baxter, are you willing to risk everything for a chance at real justice?" His hand covered hers, trapping it against his chest. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A partnership. Your knowledge of the territory, my skills with infiltration and elimination. Together we destroy Cross and his partners before they kill us both." Her free hand moved to rest against his jaw, thumb brushing across his cheek. "But I need to know you can handle working with someone like me." "Someone like you?" Her smile was pure sin. "Someone who's very good at getting what she wants, using whatever methods necessary." She leaned closer, her lips almost touching his ear. "Someone who's been thinking about kissing you since the moment you found me in the desert." Before he could respond, she pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, and he saw a vulnerability there that made his chest ache. "But first I need to know, when I ask you that question later tonight, what will your answer be?" "What question?" Rose's question hung between them like smoke from a dying fire, and Clyde found himself trapped by eyes that held secrets he wasn't sure he wanted to discover. The way she looked at him like she was memorizing every detail of his face made something wild and reckless stir in his chest. The question I've been wanting to ask since I saw you ride out of that dust cloud to find me. Her hands moved to his shoulders, fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. But first, we need to discuss our immediate problem. She gestured toward the dead men. These three won't be missed until tomorrow, but when they are, Cross will send more, better ones. We need to be somewhere else when that happens. Clyde forced himself to focus on practical matters, though her proximity made thinking difficult. There's an abandoned mine about 10 miles south. Good defensive position, water source, multiple escape routes. Perfect. She moved away from him, and he immediately felt the loss of her warmth. We'll rest there tomorrow. Plan our approach. She began dragging the first body toward a natural depression in the rocks. Help me hide these, then we ride. Working together to conceal evidence of their deadly encounter created an intimacy he hadn't expected. Their hands brushed as they moved rocks, their bodies pressed close as they maneuvered the bodies into position. Every accidental touch sent heat through his system, and from the way Rose's breathing changed when he leaned across her, he wasn't the only one affected. There, she said, stepping back to survey their work. By the time anyone finds them, we'll be long gone. The desert stretched endlessly around them, silver painted by moonlight and filled with the kind of silence that made whispered words seem loud. Rose walked to where he stood beside their horses, and something in her expression made his mouth go dry. Before we ride into whatever's waiting for us, she said softly, I need to know something important. She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel heat radiating from her body. I need to understand what kind of man you really are. Her hands moved to rest against his chest, and he could feel his heart hammering beneath her palms, because what we're about to do together will require absolute trust, the kind of trust that means knowing someone completely. Rose, his voice came out rough. I've shown you who I really am, she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I've killed 3 men in front of you. I've admitted to being a trained assassin seeking revenge. I've told you I'm wanted by the same government I once served. Her hands moved up to frame his face, thumbs tracing the line of his jaw. And yet you're still here. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities that could destroy them both. When she spoke again, her words carried the weight of everything unspoken. So tell me, Clyde Baxter, she breathed, her lips so close to his that he could feel her words against his mouth. Do you fear me or desire me? The question from the title hung in the desert air between them, and every instinct he possessed screamed conflicting answers. For a heartbeat that lasted an eternity, Clyde stared into Rose's eyes and saw his own reflection caught between starlight and shadow. Her question hung in the air like a challenge, like a promise, like the most dangerous thing he'd ever heard. Both, he said finally, his voice rough with honesty. I should fear you. Any sane man would ride away from a woman who kills like breathing and lies like poetry. His hands came up to cover hers where they rested against his face. But I've never wanted anything more in my life than to find out what happens when I stop being sane. The smile that spread across her lips was radiant and terrible. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. When she kissed him, it was nothing like the gentle touches he'd imagined. Rose kissed him like she did everything else with complete commitment and deadly precision. Her mouth was fire and whiskey and promises that could destroy him. And he kissed her back with 3 weeks of grief and anger and need that had been building since the moment he saw his father's ranch reduced to ash. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. We can't go back from this, Clyde. Once we ride together, once we trust each other completely, there's no pretending this is just about revenge. I know, his thumb traced the curve of her cheek, marveling at the softness of skin that belonged to hands capable of killing. But I need you to know something too. When this is over, when Cross and his partners are dead or destroyed, I don't want you to disappear into the night like some beautiful ghost. Her eyes searched his face, What are you saying? I'm saying I lost everything I thought mattered when they burned my ranch. My father's dream, my future, my place in the world. He pulled her closer until there was no space between them. But maybe some things need to burn before you can build something better. Rose's hands fisted in his shirt. Clyde, what we're about to do, it's going to make us both criminals, federal fugitives. We'll never have a normal life. Since when has either of us been normal? He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. Besides, I'd rather be a wanted man with you than a respectable man without you. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the desert, and Rose pulled back to scan the horizon. Not thunder, more riders coming fast from the direction of town. Cross was sending reinforcements already. Time to go, she said, but her eyes never left his face. Are you ready for this? Really ready? Because once we start, we don't stop until every one of them is dead or ruined. Clyde swung up onto his horse, then reached down to help her mount. The feel of her hand in his, the trust implicit in the gesture, sealed something between them that felt more binding than any marriage vow. Let's finish what they started, he said. Rose smiled, and in that expression he saw the promise of justice, vengeance, and a future he'd never dared imagine. Samuel Cross has no idea what's coming for him. They rode south toward the abandoned mine, leaving behind the bodies of their enemies, and any pretense that either of them would emerge from this unchanged. In the distance, the sound of pursuit grew louder, but for the first time since his world burned, Clyde Baxter wasn't running from his fate. He was riding toward it with the most dangerous woman he'd ever met by his side. 6 months later, Clyde stood on the porch of his rebuilt ranch, watching Rose tend to the horses in the corral. The morning sun caught the gold in her hair, and he still felt that familiar surge of heat every time she looked at him with that knowing smile. The wanted posters bearing their names had been withdrawn 3 weeks ago. Amazing how quickly federal charges disappear when you present evidence of government corruption to the right newspaper editors. Rose's Pinkerton training had proven invaluable in documenting every bribe, every illegal land grab, every murder Cross and his partners had orchestrated. Samuel Cross had died in his jail cell, apparently by his own hand. Though the guard had been mysteriously absent for exactly the time it took, they had needed someone who knew how to make murder look like suicide. Thomas Kellerman had lost his banks when federal agents froze and seized everything he owned. Rather than stand trial, he ran south across the border. Marcus Wade had been found at the bottom of his well, 2 bullets in the back of his head, the killers never identified. Justice, Rose had called it once, divine, and very human. The ranch was different now, larger, stronger. They had purchased the surrounding properties from families who had once suffered under Cross's schemes. Families compensated with money reclaimed from stolen accounts. What had started as Clyde's father's modest dream had grown into the largest operation in 3 counties, employing half the territory. "You're thinking too hard again," Rose said, climbing the porch steps with that effortless grace that still stole his breath. She no longer wore black leather, but practical ranch clothes instead. Still, the guns remained at her hips. Some habits didn't fade. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Clyde said, pulling her into his arms. She fit against him as if she'd always belonged there. "A year ago, I was a struggling rancher barely keeping the lights on. Now I'm a reformed outlaw who owns the biggest spread in 3 counties. He smiled down at her. "Married to the most dangerous woman in the territory." He pressed a kiss to her temple, breathing in the familiar scent of jasmine and gun oil. "Not exactly the life my father imagined for me." "It's the life you chose," she replied softly. Her arms circled his waist, warmth and steel all at once. "No regrets?" Clyde looked out over the land they had built, bought with blood, protected by loyalty, sealed with trust. In the distance, hired hands worked the cattle. Good men. Men who had lost everything to Cross's corruption and found purpose here. They asked no questions about their employer's past. They earned their place through hard work and gave loyalty freely in return. None, he said honestly, though I do have one question. Rose pulled back slightly, one eyebrow arching, the look that always meant trouble. Only one? He grinned, feeling younger than he had in years. When strangers ride up asking about the owners of this place, and you give them that particular smile of yours, he brushed his finger lightly along her jaw. Do you think they fear us or desire us? Rose laughed, warm, rich, full of promise. Both, she said, echoing words once spoken in a desert long ago. And that's exactly how I like it. They kissed on the porch of what had once been ashes and was now a legacy. Two dangerous souls who had found something worth being dangerous for. And as Clyde looked over the land stretching beneath the wide western sky, he knew one thing with certainty. His father would have been proud. If you enjoyed this story, tap the next video on your screen to watch another unforgettable Western tale where courage and destiny collide in ways you never expect. Don't forget to subscribe and consider supporting the channel so we can keep bringing you powerful stories like this. Your support means everything.